Hi, it's Nick Park here from Evangelical Alliance Ireland, and welcome once again to our Friday message. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. And I'm delighted today that I've got the opportunity to talk with Alan Wilson. Now, I was on a Zoom call with Alan. In fact, we're still on the Zoom call, and I was taking part in his podcast, and I asked if Alan would return the favor because there's an event that he's involved in that I really do feel is important because we're seeing across Ireland, we're seeing leaders who, some of whom are struggling, some of whom are buckling under the strain of expectations. And
Mhm.
sometimes I sit down with pastors and I hear the expectations that are being placed upon them, either by themselves or by the culture they're coming from or their own particular church culture. And I think that nobody can actually live like this. This is not healthy. And so I've been increasingly interested in the whole concept of soul care and how particularly leaders look after themselves. And then I saw that Alan and his wife Pauline are going to be leading an Evangelical Alliance Northern Ireland event in Lisburn on Thursday, the 10th of April, called Don't Kill Your Horse, a morning for church leaders. And Alan, I was so intrigued by this, and I've a suspicion I know what it's going to be about, and it fits in with what I've just been talking about. But tell us a bit more what Don't Kill Your Horse is all about.
Okay, don't kill your horse. Well, thanks, Nick, for having me on this little Friday. What do you call it? Friday,
Friday, well, we call it, I always call it the Friday message because
the
some
Friday
people listen
message.
by radio, some people watch the
Okay,
video.
well, thank you for
But
having me on the
it's
Friday.
Friday, but Sunday's coming.
Okay, thank you for having me on your show. If we were Americans, we could put it like that. Yeah, don't kill your horse. There is a story that's told about Robert Murray McShane. Now, unfortunately, no one, I don't think anybody's been able to provide conclusive evidence that he actually said this thing. But the story goes that as he was dying, he was 29 years old. That much is true. His health had gone, and he's reported to either have written or said to a friend, "The Lord gave me a message and he gave me a horse. I've killed the horse and now I cannot deliver the message." Now, whether that is a little bit of folklore or not, the point actually stands. That
Well,
those
you
of
know
it,
what you know what we say down here? We say never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
and if you're a preacher, well, it's a good illustration, isn't it? And I think there's probably quite a few preacher stories that are around. But the reality is, for any of us who are in ministry, who've been given a message to communicate, if we damage the vehicle that God has given us, and which is our bodies, our minds, if we damage that, then we can find ourselves in a situation where we're no longer able to communicate the message that's been given. So we've put that theme on it. My wife doesn't particularly like the title. We've used it at another event, and the event went okay, I think, despite the title. But that's what we're thinking about. It's really to encourage leaders to take a little bit of time and to think about self-care. You referred to soul care. Maybe it's a slightly more appealing way of talking about it than self-care. Self-care sometimes carries the wrong kinds of connotations. But soul care, how do we look after ourselves? A little bit like, to use another analogy, it's like when we're on the airplane and the safety briefing has been given. Make sure you put your own life jacket on before you try to help someone else with theirs, or your own oxygen mask before you try to help someone else with theirs. And if those of us who are in ministry are not taking some kind of care to sustain our ministry, then we're in danger of our ministries burning out, and we're not able to help the people that we're called to help.
And in the past, sometimes this was almost expected. I mean, I came to Christ through the Salvation Army, and reading through the history of the Salvation Army back in the days of General Booth, it was like when you read the stories of the Salvation Army officers back then, nearly all of them suffered from burnout.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
it seemed to be an occupational hazard that just came with the territory.
Yeah, yeah, and I think someone once said that the whole thing about burnout, better to burn out than rust out. To which another wise person said, well, either way, you're out. And burnout is a reality, and I think the reality is that we cannot go into Christian ministry and expect that it's going to be easy. It's not right that we do that. Uh, Paul in the New Testament worked hard. Wasn't it Epaphras that he talked about who wrestled in prayer?
Mhm.
Paul carried burdens, felt heavy responsibility, and I think it's clear all the way through Scripture that spiritual leadership is about responsibility. It's about taking responsibility, and taking responsibility is not easy, and it's inevitable that there will be strains. But I think we can get to a point where we cross over, and we move from simply maybe the exhaustion that comes from hard work, and we push to a point that is beyond what it should be. I've been reading a book recently, and it's somewhere on my desk. I wasn't anticipating referring to it. It's a new book by Ajit Fernando. I'll probably refer to it on that morning at Vic Rin. New book by Ajit Fernando, um, who's in Sri Lanka, and some people may have read some of his other stuff.
I
It's a
remember
book.
here speaking at Cape Town at the
Oh
Lausanne
wow, right,
conference
yeah.
many years ago. Yes,
Yeah, I think it's called Joyful Perseverance.
right.
And he talks about how some of his friends in the West say to him, Ajit, you're working very hard. And he often is working very hard. And I've read his letters, and I know that he often seems to be under a lot of stress. And he makes an observation. This isn't one of the chapters in the books. He makes an observation that his sense is that a lot of Christian leaders in the West are actually ministering out of a place of insecurity. Now, you talked about expectations, and sometimes expectations are self imposed. And I think if we're working out of a place of insecurity, then that puts an extra stress on us that maybe we shouldn't really be having to bear. So we'll talk, all being well, on that morning. I'll take folks into Scripture. We'll look a little bit at Scripture, some of the invitations that Jesus gives us to come and spend time with Him. And we'll think about some of the burdens. Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are laboring and have heavy burdens." He was talking specifically about the Pharisaical requirements in terms of the law. But I think there's a principle that often we have what are actually man-made burdens that are on us, and we need to find rest. So we'll look at some of that. We'll look at some of the expectations. We'll look at some of the challenges of ministry. I'll do some of that through passage, through reflection on scriptural passage, and my wife Pauline, who's been working for a number of years now as a counselor and as a retreat leader, she'll then give some practical ways that we can help to cultivate our relationship with the Lord and our relationship with other colleagues as well, as all part of sustaining. So it's about trying to give people some space to reflect individually, but hopefully together as well, and support one another, all looking towards what it means to have sustainable ministry.
Something occurred to me there. Do you think it's possible that developments in society have actually made it easier for us in the church to talk about this? Because certainly when it comes to talking about mental health,
Yeah,
it's become much more acceptable to talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
struggles, and I mean, I can remember a time when, not just in the church, but in society in general, if somebody said they were seeing a therapist, you would say, "Gosh, they must be a bit nuts."
yeah,
Whereas now, I notice with my daughter's generation, they'll say, "Oh well, I'm going to see my therapist
yeah,
tomorrow,"
yeah.
and nobody bats an eyelid at that.
Yeah, I think it's much different. I think it's much different from what it was, Nick. I don't think the taboo has completely gone, though. I think there's still something there. And I think you're right, culturally, there's much more awareness of mental health and various steps that we can take and so on. I wonder though in ministry if there's sometimes an expectation that it doesn't affect people who are Christian leaders. A number of years ago, my wife went through depression, um, and she has spoken often about it. She's spoken often publicly about it. Um, and I remember someone expressing surprise. It was a mature Christian expressing surprise and saying, "My goodness, I never thought a pastor's wife would suffer from depression." I think, well, Why? So there's something there, and I also think that in a ministry context, sometimes there's a fear that prevents people from saying how they're doing. I think maybe sometimes maybe in a church structure, a denominational structure, maybe such that if I say, "Oh, look, I'm really struggling," well, I know I'm closing the door to certain opportunities for development or new opportunities for ministry because people are going to say, "Oh, no, he's not up to it."
Mm.
And I think that kind of thing, it's like sort of a professional, I don't know, professional shame or something like that. I think that can prevent people. There's also, I think at time, I think at times we look at other people who are in ministry who seem to be thriving, whose ministry seem to be going so much better, and we just rather not say anything rather than admit how we're really doing. Hopefully, the gathering that we'll have coming up will be an opportunity for folk to feel a sense of safety and actually be able to give genuine encouragement to one another.
I think it's good the perspective you're coming from as well, because your wife's Pauline is a counselor.
Mm,
You've been a Bible college teacher for many years,
mm.
so I think sometimes some of us, particularly guys, sometimes we sort of think if this is going to be too touchy-feely without a sort of doctrinal basis to it all. But you're bringing a bit of theological heft to this as well, aren't you?
I maybe try to drop a Greek word in here and there. No, not actually. I'm not a fluent Greek person, so, but I'm kind of kidding. I drop a theological word in somewhere just to make it for those who feel that that needs a little bit of extra theological ballast.
Well, look, I'm really looking forward to this, Alan. So that's Thursday, the 10th of April. Don't kill your horse, a morning for church leaders.
Yeah,
It's at the 10:30 a.m. at the T3 Conference Centre, which is part of the Vic Ryan complex, just on the Moira side of Lisburn.
yeah.
And people can register at the Evangelical Alliance website. I
Yeah,
presume.
yeah. The Evangelical Alliance NI website will have something that you can find out more information about it from them. Registration will be available, and folks can sign up. And I think for folks coming up from your side of the border, it's not that far from the Sprucefield roundabout to get from there to that side of Lisburn to the T3 Centre. And there's plenty of parking, and there'll be coffee and scones, and there'll be a very warm welcome, and I hope a good environment just for us to explore these things and not kill our horses.
Well, great. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you for caring for the horses.
Thank you, Nick. God bless you.
God bless you. So, thank you, Alan, for joining me. And I just want to say to all of you that are following this, do join us again next Friday. We'll be back for another edition of It's Friday, but Sunday is coming. Until then, God bless you.